Let's take a look at some information and charts on Solana for BraveNewCoin. Solana is a proof of stake network with fast throughput, cheap fees, and basically an ETH killer backed by Sam at FTX, along with CMS, 3AC, probably Sino Capital. All the usual suspects. It's done extremely well over the past month, and the question becomes, can they remain decentralized? Can they bring devs in? Can they do everything better, faster, stronger than everybody else? Can they incentivize growth in a continuous organic manner? And we're all seeing that play out day to day. You know, is this all hype cycle stuff? Are they just going to relaunch everything from Ethereum on Solana, which is perfectly reasonable as competition? But is that going to be enough to compete against ETH and everybody else? It may be enough, but we'll see. You know, we'll know in a year from now, 2 years from now, when the VCs and CT influencers stop talking about Solana and see where price sits from there. So from now on, you know, we can look at fundamentals and technicals and just make a best guess decision. Now Solana is in the newer stages. It is probably somewhere in between incubator and live net, mainnet type stuff. So they are going to have issues from time to time. Issues that, to me, point to a certain degree of centralization that, you know, some people wouldn't be comfortable with. But this is all sort of par for the course in newer type blockchains, and most people generally don't care at this stage of the game. They also have, like I said, Sam through FTX, and FTX is on a advertising blitz, media blitz, acquiring blitz. They just have more money than they know what to do with, apparently, but they're doing smart things with it in that they're bringing people with an incredibly large amount of influence and money into the fold. This came out today. Steph Curry becomes global ambassador of FTX. So stuff like that's going to have a massive effect on user numbers, exchange numbers, volume, people's belief in the success of certain coins on certain exchanges backed by certain people. The Solana chart itself is a bit weird, and that, you know, with the bounce we had today, I'll get to that in the technicals section, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily normal. And it's stuff like this that certainly helps that bounce the way it did. Like I already mentioned, they're basically just launching anything that's on ETH on Solana, which is fine, good for them, right? So they're going to have DEXs, AMM, they already have DEXs, but they're going to have AMMs, they're going to have NFTs, degen apes, they're going to have all sorts of stuff, ICOs, IEOs. You know, the success of that stuff remains to be seen as far as comparisons to ETH, but it's not for a lack of trying that they're going to outcompete ETH at their own game. On Solana.beach or SolanaBeach.io, they have most of the numbers I'll be looking at for the fundamentals on Solana. And with a proof of stake network, you got to see who are the validators, how many of them are exchanges, how many of them are in China, how many of them are in the US, how many of them are decentralized globally based on interests, based on geography, right? How many of them are VCs, how many of them are exchanges. And it's not super easy to tell who's who here based on the list, but they do look somewhat decentralized as far as I can tell. And they're telling you here, to improve decentralization, to delegate elsewhere besides the top 19, top 20. So again, I think it's still early stages to like see what's really going on with validators here. You just sort of have to expect a certain degree of centralization relative to things that have been around much longer. And we can look at the staking numbers, and it's around 1% after inflation, which against DeFi and lending stablecoins just isn't enough to bring people in my opinion. What's bringing people in now is price appreciation. Obviously, price is just bonkers over the past month. So that to people who are, you know, staking, they're like, great, right? But it's not going to make people want to stake if the speculation potential is just that much greater. You know, like this is peanuts compared to what's happened over the past month. Currently 76% staking. So that tells me there's probably an easy way to do the staking component on Solana. And or there's a large percentage of centralized Solana that is staking currently, which probably plays another role in the way price is acting. The fact that there's just very little float. You know, if the staking people aren't selling, you know, if they're just keeping it locked up, if they're hodling and there's nothing for sale, then price just keeps going up so long as everything's bullish. I think that's just obvious how that works, but it certainly helps or has helped what's going on here with price. So total inflation around 5.79% currently. And I don't quite know the supply metrics, but it looks like there's 292 million circulating with 210 non-circulating. I don't know the vesting stuff, the unlock periods, like that's all extremely important to know. More so in a bear market, honestly, but it's important to know when these occur because you may see tops in price around those times as the vesting or unlocks get released and some VC or whoever is up 10x, you know, they're more likely than not to sell some of it, if not all of it, at that point in time and move on to the next thing. So it's important to know that info if you want to get completely dialed into what's going on with price at certain levels. So they have tons of tokens on Solana already, much like ETH, you know, ERC20 type equivalents. And they have currently 6 billion TVL, which is insane. Saber, haven't heard of that one, but Radium and Serum are both DEXs, and they have some AMM stuff coming here, slowly being added. Okay, so Saber's in AMM for trading pegged assets, so similar to Curve, which makes sense why their TVL is as high as it is. But this is obviously important to pay attention to for the success long term. You know, what are the incentives to keep money here? What do the APYs look like? Fees are basically zero, so it's incredibly profitable to be participating in this stuff currently. And if you compare that to ETH, 120 billion in TVL, but fees are much, much higher. So your APYs shrink if it costs you a higher percentage to connect to these yielding platforms. You either have to leave it longer in these platforms, have more money, have more capital, or just hope fees go down when you participate, right? And for the most part, everything has trouble scaling when it gets as popular as ETH does when Bitcoin got popular in 2017. You know, certain things need to be adjusted from time to time based on scaling. So Solana's got a leg up in the moment because they're able to scale super quickly with that proof of stake component relative to ETH. And that certainly helps keep fees much, much lower than ETH. This is Radium. Looks like anything on ETH looks like MetaMask type stuff, right? Extremely easy to connect and use. UI, UX is pretty much dialed in across all these platforms at this point in time. Trading as well. You have limit orders, which you don't have on all of the Ethereum dexes. Now, I haven't used this. I have no idea what the liquidity is like, slippage. You know, I have no idea on any of that. I don't even know if this is working right now. It looks like it's really chugging, as the kids say. But it exists and it's a thing. So it's not just some idea pipe dream. Solana Google Trends, unsurprisingly, are at infinity right now, at all-time highs. And over the past, let's go past 30 days worldwide. So they're down from August 31st, surprisingly, but they're still at incredibly high highs here. And I don't know why Malta and Luxembourg are the top two, but those have been the top searches recently. Maybe Solana is a place in Malta. I don't know. This is typically going to match price. So it's, again, not surprising that Google Trends are where they're at. Flip gears to technicals, stuff that makes a little more sense to me relative to the fundamentals. Things that I can really get both hands around here. We'll start with the half-year MA. So this is the 365 MA on the 12-hour chart. So 365 divided by 2. So it's the 183 MA down here as far as the daily is concerned. First thing, obviously, volume is at mega all-time highs on FTX. And it just becomes a probability game. How long can volume continue to ramp, right? Eventually, it gets to a tipping point where stuff gets too expensive relative to the incoming capital to the exchange or to the coin. And eventually, price hits an equilibrium between buyers and sellers, and it'll either consolidate in a bullish manner, consolidate in a bearish manner, or just crumble very quickly. We had a brief crumbling this morning, and that got bought up ferociously. So some craziness going on with price intraday there. But with this indicator, green is the buy zone, red is the sell zone, and it's really sniped these bottoms as far as telling you where to buy, when to buy. Told you to buy at both bottoms in June, July. You'd be up a significant, you'd be up basically 9-10x here currently. And throughout February to May, it gave you sell signals on highs here. Now this thing can obviously push lows, it can push highs, but it's just, again, giving you an oscillator probability of when's a good time to start selling relative to the backtesting historically, right? Like if this lines up historically on backtesting, no matter what the settings are, what the time frame is, then yeah, okay, 200 looked like a pretty good place to start selling. When we get close to that level, can this thing keep going to 300? Sure it can, but it says, hey, trader, there's a good place to sell based on math up here at 200. Unsurprisingly, we've chilled out a little bit at that level today. Here is the daily chart. Again, volume is just insane volume on this on the daily. And on the daily 5200, it's never had a bearish cross, and it's bounced on the 200 successfully basically every time it got anywhere close. Obviously, we're at all-time highs. Things look incredible up here, but my worry if I was holding anything at this level would be easy come, easy go. You know, it doesn't look as crazy bullish breakout potential as it did a month ago when I did the video on Solana. Things looked very ripe for bullish continuation. Here, you just got to hope more volume comes in, more craziness starts, right? You just got to hope the euphoria just keeps on piling in if you're hoping for more. So I said this Monday, but piling out of this, DCing out of this, to me makes more sense than getting into it at this point in time, because you're risking Eiffel Towering back to some level 170, I don't know, something catastrophic really if you're long from all the way up here. So the late longers are going to get purged like they did semi this morning, and they're probably going to continue to get punished over time. There's really no free rides historically for most people. So that's how you see this stuff crumbling, Eiffel Towering, is because people miss it. They FOMO the top and then they panic sell as it's falling. And if we look at the daily cloud, it doesn't really help you as far as resistance support levels because it is at all-time high, but the Kijun currently is at 110. So if this thing does go flat, I'd be looking to 110 as support. But this is where I was last month when I was saying, okay, this is a bullish Kumo breakout. It's not always a 2x, 10x, or 5x, but it's usually pretty good, right? I should have listened to myself there and bought some. I don't know why I didn't, but this thing obviously exploded after the Kumo breakout. And if we look at Kumo breakouts on the 12-hour, which is the daily single, basically, it's only had insane Kumo breakouts in its history. All of them have been basically 500% plus before pulling back, which is even more evidence on backtesting that this thing had plenty of room to run to the upside. So currently the Kumo or the Kijun support is at 115 on the 12-hour. So 110, 115 to me is a much better buy than anything up here. Even if this thing goes to 225, it just doesn't make sense to me to buy something that's up 475% in a month and hope that it just keeps going with volume at euphoria levels. So if you're in bullish, I wish you luck, but it's not really for me at this point in time. Sol BTC, big bounce off of the 200 in July, August, had this falling wedge type of pattern that has broken up to crazy levels, hit the 2618 of the previous all-time high to December 2020 low, hit the monthly R2. It's basically zero volume up here on the VPVR relative to anything lower. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing eventually Eiffel Towers back down to some support. Easy come, easy go. If there's no resistance, support, whatever on the way up, there's going to be none on the way down. So just keep that in mind. It wasn't surprising that we crumbled this morning, right? Eventually, these things happen. But the most surprising thing is that it was bought up. You know, this thing could easily just all-time high by the end of the day at this rate. Solana ETH, same thing as far as analysis as relative to BTC, unless this thing is truly a new paradigm where people are just flipping gears and switching to Solana. It's eventually going to relax a little bit, consolidate, you know, pull back. That's just natural. RSI is basically at infinity here, as the same with BTC pair. And there was, even if I have RSI on the USD, yeah, there was a subtle bear div here, right? But this thing can just trend at an RSI above 70 for an extended period of time. So going forward, I'd watch any higher highs with a bear div here, any higher highs on lower volume, and I'd be extremely careful on holding this thing if it starts to break lower lows, because 110 is basically the nearest support that I can see based on the cloud. Lastly, I'll just mention the ETHBTC fund and DeFi portfolio that I trade for Techme Capital and Enzyme.finance, non-custodial portfolio management tools, where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM performance, allocation, and all the trades I make and when I make them. Really unfortunate trade last night. I was like, oh, we pulled back a little bit from 52. Let me add some BTC here. I wake up and we drop to 43, and I can't really do anything on ETH because gas was infinity. So if this was on Solana, man, how sweet would that be? So I hope these come down. I hope this stuff goes layer 2. It's hard for me to be incredibly nimble on this platform when fees just make it unusable at certain times. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.